It's time again for another installment of The Basics, and on today's show I want to talk about an issue in the CCG world that I've never really touched on too much, and that is players that purposely get themselves disqualified. And you're probably wondering why somebody would do that. Well, I'm going to explain to you why people do it and how it works, and the signs you need to look for when someone is about to do that. Now, let me just start by saying you're probably not going to see this happen at a really large organized tournament such as the Nationals, Internationals, Worlds, Pro Tour, depending on the CCG. You're going to see this happen in small settings. Card shops, collectible stores, regionals, pop-up games at conventions, things like that. And you would think that it's a complete waste of time for somebody to get themselves intentionally disqualified. The reason why this happens, and has happened, and I'll give you some examples shortly, is that at the smaller tournaments, you have the up-and-coming players that are maybe heading to the Nationals or the bigger tournaments, and you'll have that one type of person who wants to get a feel for the opponent's decks within a certain amount of turns, get themselves kicked out, go home with the knowledge, and rebuild a deck or tweak a deck on the spot or make a secondary deck knowing that people are employing such cards or strategies. You might think this is completely ridiculous for this to happen or someone to waste time on this, but it does. And even though it happens across most CCGs, I'm using the Star Trek CCG as my example because I have seen it happen at a regional tournament, and I've heard from other players and my circle of friends about this. And many years ago at a Decipher Sanction event, a player at a table next to me got disqualified about 6 turns in, and the judges came over and kicked him out, and we all actually stopped playing and were watching this because it never really happened before. And what happened was the player that was sitting across the table from him, his opponent, was noticing that he was either drawing an extra card or had drawn 8 cards off the start and hit it, and wasn't really paying attention at first, thinking he maybe saw something, but then saw an extra card about 6 turns in being drawn every turn, even though he didn't have a card in play that said you could do that. Fudging your hand is the one sure way to get yourself disqualified, and these people know that. If you have more than 7 cards but you're being sly about it, if your opponent's not paying attention, you could potentially pull it off. The second way it was done was, I think in that turn, if I remember correctly, after the guy put his hand up saying his opponent had drawn an extra card, he had played a banned card right after that. That's an instant no-no in a tournament, and you can tell the judge till you're blue in the face you didn't know it was in your deck, but when you're playing constructed decks, it's kind of hard to sweep that one under the rug, so you're going to get nailed, and that's an instant DQ. One of the other ways is a side deck, such as the Q's Tent, that would hide additional banned cards. And if your opponent's not paying attention in the seed phase, he could potentially hide a Toxutot, which is harmless on its own, even though it is a banned card. If he has the Supernova in the side deck, or you rather, and you bring that out, that's an instant DQ. During the Decipher era and through a lot of those regional tournaments, especially up here because I lived here the first time around and went to a lot of these regional tournaments, and so did my friends, they saw a lot of this going down, extra card draws and banned cards, and it was by players we knew from our circles that were more experienced, and you think they wouldn't do this, but at the same time, when you're further enough into a game and you can see the theme of your opponent's deck, as well as some of his cards, and you're kind of getting an idea of how the game's going to go. I don't condone people getting themselves disqualified like that. It's ridiculous. It's a waste of time. If you're coming to a tournament just to get yourself disqualified, where to begin? Where to begin? It goes hand in hand with cheating, but technically you're not cheating in a sense because you're going to get DQ'd, and that is your purpose in the game, is to get DQ'd. That having been said, it also harkens back to my previous episodes where I talked about cheating, in which I mentioned that anyone that goes to any tournament really needs to pay attention to what their opponent is doing as the game is being played. This is more pertinent, especially with this DQ scenario, that you're going to pick up on this quickly if you're paying attention, and you might be able to head it off beforehand, possibly call a judge over and get it dealt with soon. Depending on where the tournament is and who's running it, a DQ on your opponent doesn't necessarily mean you're going to pick up a win and move on, depending on the bracket or what type of game you're playing in said tournament. So be aware of what your opponent is doing. You need to know about disqualifications and why people do them. Have a great day, everybody.